Sergeant Roy Tanner shoved a black biker face down on the scorching pavement, mocking him as another nobody on a stolen Harley. But that nobody, Marcus Reed, stayed silent because the man they were humiliating was the federal investigator sent to expose their corrupt department. One arrogant stop, and their whole world was about to crumble. Have you ever seen power abuse itself this badly? If this moment hits your sense of justice, give it a like and share it with someone who still believes truth always finds a way. Now let's begin the story. I was there that morning on the Arizona highway, heat coming off the asphalt in lazy waves, when the Harley rolled in and idled beside the pumps. The rider was squared away, black leather, full-face helmet, boots, buffed clean. Later I'd learned his name was Marcus Reed. In the moment, all I saw was a man topping off a silver bike and keeping to himself. A white patrol car nosed in hard bumper, almost kissing the curb. Two officers climbed out. The driver moved like he owned the place. Thick shoulders, jaw-locked sunglasses that never blinked. Sergeant Roy Tanner. The younger one, Dylan Briggs, hung back a half-step, hands unsure of where to rest. You can tell a veteran from a rookie just by how they breathe. Tanner breathed like this was entertainment. Briggs breathed like he'd stumbled into the wrong room. Tanner didn't ask if anything was wrong. He closed distance and looked the rider up and down, not like a person, like inventory. "Nice bike," he said, voice flat enough to cut. "You steal it?" The question hung there, heavy and mean. People froze. A couple at another pump pretended to check their tires. I felt my chest tighten the way it does before something you can't take back. The rider lifted his visor just enough for Tanner to see his eyes. Calm eyes, patient eyes. "It's a free road," he said. Mild, but there was steel under it. Tanner stepped closer, toe on the line between harassment and assault. License, registration, all of it. Now. The rider moved slow, too slow for Tanner's nerves, hands visible the whole time. He pulled a wallet and a small leather folio, the kind government people use when they travel. Tanner snatched both, flipped the wallet open, and smirked like he'd caught a magic trick mid-reveal. "Colonel, huh?" he said. "In what army?" The man didn't blink. "You have 5 minutes before you end your career." I swear the air changed. The pumps hummed. Somewhere a cicada chattered and then went quiet. Tanner's smile thinned into something uglier. "Ain't that a threat?" he said, and with a flick of his wrist, he sent the wallet skidding across the concrete. Cards fanned, a photo flashed, a family frozen in a dress uniform day. Then the folio slipped from his hand, hit the pavement, and a red envelope slid out just enough to show its stamp. Federal Oversight Task Force, Confidential. Tanner barked a laugh that had no humor in it. "Cute fake," he said, and tore the flap with his thumb. I heard paper protest. I also heard the younger officer Briggs suck air through his teeth. He didn't speak, but something in him did. The rider, Marcus, though none of us knew it yet, looked down at his wrist. A watch. Not the shiny kind. Functional, scuffed military. His thumb pressed the crown. No sound came out. No light that I could see. But the way he exhaled told me the world elsewhere had just been notified. "Turn around," Tanner snapped. "On your knees," Sergeant Briggs said finally, finding a voice. Policy is for people who get caught," Tanner said without looking back. Marcus turned. He didn't beg. He didn't argue. He lowered himself onto the sun-hot concrete with the control of someone who's done harder things than this and survived them. Tanner put a knee between the shoulder blades and leaned like he was trying to push the man through the earth. The sound that came from Marcus was not a cry. It was a contained breath, like someone filing away evidence. I remember being embarrassed to be human right then. Embarrassed and angry. That's the cocktail you taste on days like this. Shame you didn't step sooner, fury that someone else did first for the wrong reason. "Hands back," Tanner ordered. Metal clicked. The cuffs bit. The younger cop hovered, eyes bouncing from the red envelope to the rider's watch to the spectators who pretended not to be spectators. His lips parted like he wanted to say, "Stop," but he swallowed it and fixed on the space 2 inches from his boots. Tanner ground the heel of his palm into the back of the man's head and leaned near his ear. "You think those little props scare me," he said, toe nudging the envelope. "You people love pretending you matter." The rider's cheek pressed against the grit. He stared at a scratch in the concrete like it was a horizon line, and he could keep the world level if he chose. When he spoke, it was almost conversational. Every time you silence truth, he said, you feed corruption. Tanner snorted. Every time you talk, you make me hate you more. A hush spread. Even the pump beeps seemed quieter. The rookie shifted again the way a man does when his conscience has found a pebble in his shoe. Across the lot, a woman's phone rose chest high and didn't come back down. I don't know her name. I only know the set of her jaw, the kind you see on mothers at school board meetings and nurses at double shifts. Tanner snapped a glance her way, then dismissed her like a fly. Wrong move, I thought. Some witnesses are more stubborn than paperwork. Marcus's watch face flashed once a pinprick of red I might have imagined if I'd wanted to. He closed his eyes, counted silently. You could see it in the tendons of his neck, the way they flexed and eased. 5 minutes is a long time when your face is on a road that remembers 100 summers. Tanner hauled him to his feet by the chain and shoved him toward the patrol car. The red envelope slid, caught a gust, and skittered across the bay until it landed against my sneaker. The stamp stared up at me like an accusation and a promise. Briggs made a small sound. Sergeant, we should call it in. At least run. You want to finish that sentence, Tanner said. He slammed the back door open. Get in. Marcus turned his head just enough to meet the rookie's eyes. It wasn't a plea. It was a mirror. Whatever Briggs saw in it, he didn't like. Last chance, Tanner said to the man he'd just shoved. Give me a reason not to throw the book at you. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You've just started an investigation, he said almost kindly, on yourself. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The wind paused like it was waiting for permission to blow again. Tanner blinked, confused, because bullies don't speak that language. Briggs swallowed hard. Somewhere behind me, a pump clicked finished, and no one touched it. That's how it began. Not with a car chase or a weapon drawn, but with contempt mistaken for authority, and a man who measured time and consequences. I didn't know his name then. I didn't know about the task force or the beacon or how wide this thing would ripple. I only knew this power had just picked the worst possible man to make an example of, and the clock he started wasn't counting for him. I remember the first phone that rose. It was the woman from the mini-mart, Evelyn Powell, hair, pin-back wedding band still on, though she'd told the cashier last week she was a widow. She didn't shake. She just lifted her phone and framed the scene like she'd been waiting her whole life to document a moment nobody would believe. Ma'am, Tanner barked, pointing like a traffic cone had offended him. Put that down. Evelyn didn't flinch. My son's a cop, she said, voice steady as a church bell. He wouldn't treat a veteran like that. You could see Tanner choose cruelty. You're obstructing police work, he warned, finger inches from her lens. She held the line. I'm recording public conduct on public property. Across the pumps, a dusty pickup fishtailed into an open space. The driver hopped out before it stopped rocking. Gray buzz cut sun-scored, face-old unit patch on his sleeve, Frank Thompson. He took one look at the man in cuffs, and his whole body softened, like someone opened a door in winter. That's Colonel Reed, he whispered. He saved my life in Iraq. Frank started toward them, jaw tight, with the kind of anger that protects more than it punishes. Marcus, faced to the glass of the patrol car, turned just enough to find him. He didn't beg. He didn't recruit. He just shook his head once. Stay out of this, Frank, he said, a command masked as a favor. This one's mine. It was the kind of line that hangs in the air and changes the barometric pressure. Tanner, meanwhile, reached for his chest like he'd remembered a chore. His fingers found the Bodycam, and with a tiny twist, the red dot died. A casual erasure. He didn't even look guilty. Sir Briggs' stammered voice coming out younger than his age. That's against policy. Policies for people who get caught. Tanner said, never breaking eye contact with Marcus, like the man was a mirror he wanted to crack. Something shifted in the rookie then. He stood there, boots-rooted hands, useless eyes bright with a truth he didn't want. First times have a sound? That was it. The sound of a man realizing the rule book he studied at night might not survive the daylight. Evelyn's voice carried across the island. You can't do this. She wasn't shouting for effect. She was shouting like a neighbor would, like a nurse at the end of a double shift who knows exactly what a small wrong becomes when nobody names it. Tanner stabbed a finger toward her again. Last warning. Briggs glanced between them, caught in a triangle the humiliated man, the woman with a phone, the sergeant who could ruin his career with one bad report. His throat worked. Nothing came out. Marcus broke the silence, not to plead, but to place a stone in the river. Every system falls, he said, voice, even when good men stay silent. It landed where it needed to, right behind Briggs's sternum. I watched him inhale like the sentence had rearranged the furniture inside him. Frank forgot the gas pump entirely and dug out his phone, hand suddenly steady. He scrolled with a veteran's efficiency, found a number, and hit call. David, he said, when it connected, no hello, no chat. It's Grandpa. Colonel Reed's in trouble. He gave the location like grid coordinates, clipped and precise. Whoever was on the other end understood the language. While Frank spoke, Evelyn drifted closer, in that way older women do, full of purpose, impossible to bully. She narrated what she saw under her breath for the sake of the footage he's not resisting. They turned the camera off. He warned them. They don't care. You could feel the history in her voice, the years of small indignities she'd cataloged and refused to normalize. Tanner opened the back door and pressed Marcus's head down to clear the frame. It would have been easy to see only humiliation there. But up close you noticed something else, the precision with which Marcus moved the control of a man who had learned to survive not by being harder, but by being exact. He settled on the seat wrists, bit by steel. He let his head rest against the partition and glanced down at his watch. I caught the angle just enough to see a faint green pulse wink to life on the bezel. A signal, I thought, or maybe I only hoped it was. Either way, Marcus's breathing changed. Not relief. Confirmation. Evelyn's phone kept rolling. Frank ended his call and stood with his shoulders squared, an old soldier back at a post he thought he'd left. Briggs didn't move at all. That was the strangest part. How still he got, like the only way to keep from doing the wrong thing was to do nothing at all. Sergeant, he tried again, softer, like he was asking permission to have a conscience. We should at least document. Tanner slammed the door on Marcus and turned slow, predator calm. You want to document something, rookie document, that I told you to learn? Briggs's jaw trembled, then locked. He nodded because nodding was cheaper than fighting your boss in a parking lot. But the nod had no loyalty in it. Frank stepped closer to the car just inside the line that would get him arrested. He met Marcus's eyes through the glass. No words, just a veteran's promise, I see you. Marcus gave him half a blink in return, I know. Evelyn took a small step sideways to keep the whole scene framed. Tanner's swagger, Briggs's crisis, the man in cuffs whose calm was starting to feel like gravity. A couple teenagers had pulled in phones out, whispering the way people do when history is shy and might scare off if you speak too loud. Tanner climbed into the driver's seat, muttering something about paperwork for liars. The engine cough settled. He reached for the radio, then thought better of leaving a record. That told me more than anything else about what he understood and what he feared. Through the glass, Marcus looked at his watch again. The green blinked 1-2, then steadied into a faint, steady thrum, like a heartbeat you could only see if you already believed it was there. Briggs saw it too. His brow folded, not in recognition, but in an awareness he couldn't file yet. He leaned a fraction closer, squinting at the light that shouldn't have meant anything, and somehow did. He didn't know the word for it. None of us did. We only knew something had just connected, some wire we couldn't see running from that watch to somewhere larger than the four of us and the woman with the phone. And for the first time since the patrol car arrived, the rookie's eyes held on to something other than fear. It was small, but it was there. The alert hit the Pentagon at 11:04 a.m., a soft chime that only a handful of people on the planet ever hear. General Elaine Hayes, 4 stars and 40 years of service, looked up from her briefing papers. The red banner on her monitor read, Shadow Alert. Her tone turned cold. That means a field investigator's compromised, she said. Find him, now. Across the command center, analysts snapped into motion. Dozens of screens flickered, pulling in feeds from military satellites, GPS pings, and encrypted signals. Within seconds, a green pulse appeared on one of the maps, an innocuous Arizona highway. ID confirmed, said a young technician. Signal coming from Agent Marcus Reed's emergency beacon. Hayes's jaw clenched. Reed doesn't trigger that unless he's outnumbered or bleeding. Send in rapid containment level 3, but do not break cover until I say so. Meanwhile, inside the patrol car, the desert hummed like a low fever. Tanner drove one hand on the wheel, the other resting on his holster, chewing gum like it owed him money. So, Colonel, he said, glancing into the rearview mirror. Don't make me laugh. You really think a fake ID is going to impress me? Marcus met his eyes through the glass divider, steady as stone. "You'll stop laughing soon." That tone, quiet, certain, bothered Tanner more than shouting ever could. He rolled his eyes, but something behind the bravado shifted. Briggs noticed it, the twitch at the jawline, the way Tanner's hand suddenly gripped the wheel too tight. Sir Briggs started. "Maybe we should run his credentials." Rookie Tanner snapped. "You're here to learn how the world really works, not the fairy tale they teach at the academy." Briggs turned back to the window, but unease crawled under his skin. His gut said something larger than a traffic stop was unfolding, something dangerous enough that silence now felt like complicity. At that same moment, Frank Thompson's call reached Washington. His grandson, Lieutenant David Thompson, answered from a secure wing 2 floors below General Hayes's office. The background hum of servers and typing filled the line. "Grandpa David, listen, Colonel Reed's in trouble. 2 cops have him cuffed at a gas station in Lakeside. I saw it with my own eyes." David's voice sharpened. "Colonel Reed." "From Oversight." "The same. He told me to stay back." "Text me the coordinates," David said, already on his feet. He sprinted to the command center and intercepted Hayes outside her glass office. "Ma'am, confirmation civilian witness," identified Reed. "Local police, Lakeside Precinct." Hayes didn't hesitate. "Patch me to Defense Intelligence. Full satellite feed on that GPS location. And I want the governor briefed quietly." Within moments, black SUVs began leaving the Pentagon motor pool. Out on the highway, Evelyn Powell's video went live. She hadn't meant for it to spread, it was just habit to upload it for safekeeping, but within 10 minutes it was trending. "Justice on the road, Chirkchurger Colonel Reed." The hashtags stacked up like dominoes. Newsrooms noticed before the police chief did. Frank saw it too, jaw tightening as comments poured in. "How is this happening again? He's not even resisting." "Somebody call the feds." Back inside the car, Tanner's phone buzzed with notifications he ignored. He wanted control of the moment, not the mess online. But when Briggs's device chirped with the same alerts, his expression shifted from curiosity to alarm. "Sir, this video, it's us," Tanner snorted. "Let them watch. They'll see who's in charge." He didn't sound convinced. Marcus sat perfectly still. His breathing evened out, almost meditative. The tension in his shoulders melted into composure. The calm of someone counting down to something nobody else could see. At the Pentagon, Hayes leaned over the map. "How long before containment reaches him?" 17 minutes, ma'am." "Too long," she said. "Get me state police intercept in 8. Should we alert local command? Negative. The moment they know who he is, the story leaks. This stays federal." She folded her arms, eyes locked on the glowing green pulse. It beat once every second, Marcus's silent heartbeat across a continent. Tanner's voice filled the car again, strained this time. "What's your game, old man?" "You one of those deep state types?" Marcus opened his eyes, finally meeting the mirror again. "You think this is about me? It's not. It's about you." Tanner laughed nervously, but the sound cracked. "You threatening me again?" "No," Marcus said softly. "Just telling you the truth." Briggs's hands fidgeted against his knees. "Sir, maybe we should just call this in," Tanner barked. "You'd better remember which side you're on." Briggs swallowed. "Maybe I just don't know anymore." The silence that followed was heavy enough to break something inside that patrol car. At 11:23, the rapid containment team rolled out from Luke Air Force Base, 5 armored vehicles and formation engines, low and steady. Their orders were clear: locate, observe, and protect. Do not engage unless the agent's life was in imminent danger. Hayes watched them move on the monitor, a green convoy threading through the desert roads like veins of resolve. She spoke to herself, barely audible. "Hold on, Marcus." Back on the asphalt, Tanner's arrogance began to fray. He glanced again at the rear view, caught Marcus's reflection. Eyes closed, breathing slow, face unreadable. "What are you doing back there?" Tanner snapped. Marcus's lips moved barely enough to form words. "Counting." Tanner blinked. Counting what Marcus didn't answer. Outside, the sun glared off the cruiser's hood like a silent clock ticking down. Inside, nobody realized that every passing mile was broadcasting to the Pentagon, to military command, to every phone, refreshing, "There's justice on the road." The world had begun to watch, and the ones in power had begun to move. The air grew heavier, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. They dragged Marcus into the station just past noon, the air inside thick with old coffee dust and the kind of tension that never quite leaves a police room. Tanner shoved him into a metal chair so hard the legs screeched against the tile. The sound made everyone nearby flinch. "Still quiet, huh?" Tanner leaned forward, breath sour with confidence. "That arrogance won't save you now." Marcus didn't reply. His hands were cuffed to the chair, his back straight, his breathing calm. He looked less like a man under arrest and more like someone waiting for others to realize their mistake. Briggs stood near the door, pretending to scroll through his tablet, but his thoughts were 1,000 miles away, back to a night when red and blue lights painted his front yard. He'd been 8, hiding behind the couch. His father, a construction worker, soft-spoken black, was outside explaining that the car wasn't stolen, that it was his, that he'd just bought it used. The officer hadn't cared. The sound of the baton hitting the hood came before the sound of his father hitting the ground. Briggs had never forgotten that silence, after the kind of silence that made you hate noise. Now, standing in the present, that memory buzzed in his skull. And when he saw Tanner flick his body cam off again, something inside Briggs cracked. "Sir," he said quietly, "you're supposed to keep it on." Tanner gave him a sideways glare. "Policies for Sunday school, son." Briggs's fingers trembled on the device. He turned the camera back on, pretending to review footage, but in the process, his thumb brushed the wrong icon. One small, innocent tap. And just like that, the live training channel for the department's IT division, used to teach interns about equipment testing, lit up with a feed from inside the interrogation room. Streaming live. Public. The red dot blinked in the corner. The timer started. The whole thing was live within seconds, but no one noticed. Not yet. Tanner paced in front of Marcus, every word dripping contempt. "You think your fancy jacket or your little ID card makes you untouchable?" He sneered. "You're just another guy who thought he could talk down to the wrong cop." Marcus slowly lifted his gaze. His eyes found the lens of the camera perched on Briggs's chest. He looked directly into it, steady, deliberate. And then he spoke, voice low and resonant. "You're about to see what corruption looks like." Briggs froze. He hadn't told anyone the camera was on again, much less that it was broadcasting. He didn't even know where Marcus was looking. But in that instant, it felt like the man knew everything. Tanner's palm cracked across Marcus's face. The sound echoed through the room. "Shut up," he barked. "You don't speak unless I tell you to." Marcus's head turned back slowly. Blood traced a thin line down his cheek, but his voice didn't shake. "You just slapped the man investigating you." The words were simple, but they detonated. Briggs's eyes widened. Tanner went pale for a fraction of a second before anger returned to fill the space fear had opened. "What the hell are you talking about?" Tanner hissed, but the damage was done. The screen behind Briggs flickered. On one of the station monitors usually reserved for dispatch updates, the IT training stream appeared. Someone in the back office must have pulled it up, confused about the sudden live feed. Then someone gasped. "Is that?" Right now, within minutes, the stream flooded social media. One viewer became 10. 10 became 10,000. Then 1,000,000. Justice on the Road was trending again, this time with live footage. Outside in her small kitchen across town, Evelyn Powell nearly dropped her coffee when the notification popped up. She tapped the link, expecting another short clip. Instead, she saw Marcus, hands cuffed, cheek red, eyes calm, staring straight into the lens. "Oh my God," she whispered, then louder, as if saying it made it real. "He's federal." Her phone slipped against the counter. The screen kept playing. The comment feed scrolled like wildfire. "This can't be happening live. Someone call the DOJ. Who's the guy with the badge?" By the time Evelyn ran to her porch, local news vans were already on their way. Back at the station, the atmosphere shifted from arrogance to panic. Phones buzzed, officers whispered, screens lit up. Tanner's confidence faltered for the first time. "What's going on?" he barked. Briggs didn't answer, his mind racing, his heart pounding. The Bodycam's feed was still live, still broadcasting everything Tanner said, every breath he took. Marcus sat motionless, like a man who'd planned this moment down to the second. "Turn that damn thing off," Tanner yelled, lunging at Briggs. The rookie stumbled back, palms sweating, but the system was already out of his control. The live stream had mirrored onto multiple devices. Every move Tanner made now was evidence preserved in real time. On the other side of the room, a desk sergeant rushed in waving his phone. Sir, you need to see this. He turned the screen toward Tanner. Every major outlet's banner blared the same breaking headline. Breaking officers detain federal investigator assigned to their department. For a moment, the room went dead quiet. Tanner stared at the headline, jaw working soundlessly. Briggs swallowed, realizing he'd just witnessed a career ending in real time. Marcus finally broke the silence. 5 minutes, he said softly. I told you. The clock on the wall ticked once, twice. Then the phone started ringing all at once. The chief, the mayor, the governor, the Pentagon. The system Tanner thought he owned was about to turn itself inside out, and the whole world was still watching. By the time the live stream hit its 10th minute, half the country was watching. News stations cut into programming mid-sentence. Hashtags flooded every feed. Somewhere in the chaos of ringing phones and flashing headlines, the realization hit the Lakeside Police Department like a brick through glass. Chief Bennett stormed out of his office, tie, crooked face, the color of a siren light. You idiots detained a federal agent. His voice cracked through the hallway like gunfire. Tanner, standing in the middle of the room, looked smaller now, sweat on his temples, pride deflating. He never said who he was. Bennett slammed a fist on the table. He didn't have to. Behind him, the monitor still played the Bodycam footage in a silent loop. Tanner's hand striking Marcus, the blood, the calm voice saying, You just slapped the man investigating you. The words burned themselves into everyone's eyes. Marcus sat where they'd left him, cuffs biting into his wrists. Even in the storm, he looked composed, almost regal. When Bennett turned to him, Marcus's voice carried across the room, deep and steady. Corruption never needs a name, Chief. It announces itself loud enough. That line silenced the room more effectively than any command. You could almost hear people reevaluating their careers in real time. Outside, black SUVs screeched to a halt in front of the building. Agents in Navy windbreakers poured out FBI Civil Rights Division, their jackets catching the glare of flashing lights. The hum of rotors filled the air overhead as helicopters circled floodlights, slicing through the dust. Briggs was the first to move. He fumbled with the key ring, stepped forward, and released the cuffs from Marcus's wrists. The metallic click echoed louder than anyone expected. Sir, he started, guilt thick in his throat. I didn't mean. Marcus flexed his hands once the skin raw around the wrists. He looked at Briggs not with anger, but something heavier. Then mean well next time, he said quietly. That's where it starts. Briggs swallowed hard, nodding the kind of nod that meant he'd remember that sentence for the rest of his life. The front doors burst open again. Frank Thompson came in first, out of breath, but still carrying the authority of a soldier. Evelyn Powell followed, clutching her phone like a weapon. They didn't have to say anything. Everyone already knew who they were. Witnesses, the kind that history listens to. Frank's voice was rough from shouting. That's him, he told the agents, pointing straight at Tanner. That's the one who assaulted Colonel Reed. Marcus stood slowly, turning toward the commotion. The movement was calm, deliberate enough to remind everyone who he really was. The FBI agent stepped aside as another figure entered the doorway. A woman in a dark uniform, posture straight as a blade, General Elaine Hayes. Her stars caught the overhead light as she walked unhurried, assessing the chaos with a soldier's eye. The room froze. She stopped in front of Marcus, and for the first time that day, he smiled, not wide, but knowing. Welcome back, Director Hayes, said her voice carrying quiet respect. Every officer in that room froze again. The title hit harder than any siren. Director. Marcus Reed wasn't just some investigator. He was the director of the Federal Oversight Task Force, the one department designed to police the police. Tanner's mouth opened, but no words came out. When the agent stepped toward him, reality finally did. This is a mistake, he shouted, backing up, palms out. I was just doing my job. Marcus turned his head slightly, eyes cold, voice like steel. Then maybe your job, he said, needs redefining. The agents moved in swift professional. They cuffed Tanner this time with no ceremony, no hesitation. His badge clattered to the floor, a hollow sound against the tile. He looked around for sympathy and found none. Frank watched, jaw set but eyes sad. Evelyn filmed, hands trembling slightly, whispering, about time. Chief Bennett ran a shaking hand over his face. Director Reed. I save it, Marcus said. You'll have your statement opportunity soon enough. As Tanner was led past, Marcus stepped aside, just enough for their eyes to meet. The officer who once towered over him now looked small, lost. Marcus didn't gloat. He simply held Tanner's gaze until the man dropped it first. "Take him," one of the agents said. Outside, the world had turned into a sea of flashing lights. Reporters crowded behind barricades. Drones hovered above the parking lot. When Tanner stepped out in cuffs, microphones caught every word of his defiance, every desperate breath of a man who'd built his authority on fear and found it collapsing in front of cameras. Overhead, a helicopter swept its spotlight across the asphalt, painting long white arcs across the night. Marcus walked out beneath it, flanked by Hayes and Briggs, the beam catching his face for just a moment. He looked tired, but not defeated, like someone who'd seen enough battles to know that victory rarely feels like triumph, only relief. Frank and Evelyn stood at the curb watching him pass. Evelyn whispered, "You think it's over?" Frank shook his head. "For him, maybe. For the rest of us, it's just starting." Marcus paused beside the SUV door, glancing once at the chaos of cameras, lights, and uniforms. The world he'd been sent to investigate had just exposed itself live and undeniable. He exhaled slowly. "Let the system clean itself," he murmured. The helicopter's light drifted over him one last time, bright, blinding final before the doors closed and the convoy rolled into the night. They kept Marcus in a quiet room after the chaos, away from the press, away from the noise. A medic wrapped a small bandage over the cut on his cheek, his movements careful, almost reverent. Outside, the storm of flashing cameras still raged, reporters shouting into microphones about the federal director who had exposed his own arrest live. General Hayes stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the floodlights sweep over the parking lot. "Media's calling it justice on wheels," she said dryly. Marcus gave a faint, tired smile. "Justice isn't a brand," he murmured. "It's a debt that never gets paid off." Hayes studied him for a moment. "You've always had a way with words," she said. Then softer, "and wounds." Marcus didn't answer. He stared at the faint outline of the cuffs that had dug into his wrists. The skin there was red, angry and familiar, like an old scar remembering itself. The door creaked open. Briggs stepped in, hat in his hands, shoulders square but trembling. The rookie's voice cracked before the sentence even began. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't." Marcus raised a hand, gently stopping him. "Don't finish that," he said. Briggs's throat bobbed. If I'd known." "That's the thing," Marcus cut in quietly. "You weren't supposed to know. The test isn't whether you recognize power. It's whether you respect people without it." Briggs lowered his gaze, shame crawling up his neck. He wanted to speak again, but Marcus's silence held him there, heavy and instructive. Finally, the young officer nodded, once tucked his cap under his arm, and left without another word. The room went still again. Only the hum of the air conditioning filled the space. Chief Bennett entered, next his uniform, still disheveled from the shouting match outside. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. For a long second, he didn't speak. Then he took off his hat, pressed it against his chest, and said quietly, "We failed our oath, Director." Marcus looked at him, not cruelly, but with the kind of clarity that stripped away excuses. "You didn't fail it," he said. "You forgot what it was for." Bennett's eyes fell to the floor. "Maybe that's worse." Marcus didn't disagree. When Bennett left, Marcus stayed seated alone again, with the echo of his own heartbeat. He rubbed at the marks on his wrists, and suddenly the years folded in on themselves. The smell of old asphalt, the sound of his father's voice, the flash of a baton under a streetlight. He was a boy again, watching through a cracked window as his father, Elijah Reed, a postal worker who never missed a Sunday service, was forced to his knees by officers who never learned his name. It was 1968 Memphis, the summer of sirens. He remembered how his father bled quietly, refusing to curse, refusing to bow in spirit. After they drove away, Marcus had wanted to run out, to scream, to throw stones at every uniform he saw. His father stopped him with one line that had never left him. "Don't let them make you hate them, son." That sentence had shaped a lifetime. And even now, decades later, it still burned like a commandment carved into bone. Marcus felt the sting behind his eyes before he realized it was tears. One slipped down slow and quiet, tracing the edge of his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He just let it fall. The door opened again, softly this time. Evelyn Powell stepped in carrying 2 cups of coffee from the vending machine down the hall. She looked exhausted, but her eyes still carried the fierce light of someone who refused to look away. "I thought you might need this," she said, placing the cup in front of him. Marcus looked up, faint surprise crossing his face. "You shouldn't have gone through all that trouble." Evelyn smiled a little. "After what you did out there, the least I can do is buy the man a bad cup of coffee." He chuckled under his breath. The sound felt strange, human, soft. She sat across from him, folding her hands. "You reminded us that silence is a choice," she said. "People forget that." Marcus stared into the steam rising from the cup, his reflection shimmering in the dark surface. "And choices," he said, "quietly define nations." They sat there for a moment, 2 people bound by different lives, but the same truth, the weight of a country still learning how to look at itself. Outside, the noise from the media started to fade. The crowd was thinning, replaced by the distant hum of engines and the flutter of paper as officers filed their reports. The world would move on, Marcus knew, but something had shifted tonight, something irreversible. Hayes appeared at the doorway once more. "We'll have to debrief in the morning," she said, glancing at Powell. "He needs rest." Evelyn stood, nodded respectfully to Marcus, then paused. "Director, thank you for not staying silent." Marcus gave her a small, weary smile. "The truth has its own timing, Ms. Powell. I just happened to be there when it rang." She left the room quietly. Hayes lingered another moment, eyes soft with respect. Then she too stepped out, closing the door behind her. Marcus leaned back in his chair. The hum of the air vent filled the silence again. His hands rested on the table, steadier now, though the marks of the cuffs remained. He looked at them for a long time, tracing the faint red circles with his thumb. Then he whispered the words his father once said, this time to the empty room. "Don't let them make you hate them." Outside, dawn was beginning to edge over the desert horizon. And for the first time in years, Marcus let himself feel what justice might really mean, not victory, not revenge, but endurance. The kind that leaves you standing. A week later, the noise had shifted from sirens to whispers. The headlines had cooled, but the power behind them hadn't. In Washington, inside a glass-walled conference room stacked with flags and polished anger, Marcus Reed sat across from 3 men in dark suits, bureaucrats who'd never set foot on a highway, but somehow decided what justice should look like on one. One of them leaned forward, voice clipped and cold. "Your actions embarrass the department director, Reed. You exposed internal corruption without clearance. You violated protocol." Marcus sat still, hands folded on the table. His face carried the same calm that had unsettled every man who'd tried to intimidate him. Before he could speak, General Hayes, seated beside him, cut in voice sharp enough to slice the air. "He didn't embarrass the department," she said. "He saved it. You think the public sees chaos. I see credibility restored." The man in the suit frowned. "General, this isn't a debate about ideals. It's about control." Hayes leaned back, crossing her arms. "Control's exactly what corruption counts on." The room fell into tense silence. Marcus finally broke it, his voice low, deliberate. "If you're looking for someone who plays politics, you've got the wrong man." The chairman flipped a file shut. "Director Reed pending. Review your authority is suspended effective immediately." Marcus didn't flinch. "I'm not here for titles," he said simply. "I'm here for truth. Keep the badge if it makes you feel safer." Hayes turned toward him, something like pride flickering in her eyes, but she said nothing. Sometimes defense only weakens the weight of a man's conviction. That afternoon, back in his modest office, Marcus packed quietly. The city outside the window buzzed with the rhythm of indifference, cars, horns, the pulse of normal life moving on, while history caught its breath. A soft knock broke the silence. Briggs stepped in, no uniform this time, just a plain shirt sleeves rolled up, eyes heavy. "I wanted to say goodbye," he said. Marcus didn't turn. "You quitting?" Briggs hesitated. "I'm leaving the force. I thought I joined to make things better. But after what I saw," Marcus faced him, then a faint, tired smile ghosting across his lips. "Then you learned the lesson too early." Briggs frowned. "Too early," Marcus nodded. "The system changes when those inside it refuse to look away. If you walk out now, you leave it to the ones who never will." Briggs swallowed hard. "Maybe. But I don't think I can wear that badge without hearing what he said to you." Marcus looked at him, understanding in his eyes. Then take it with you. Just don't forget it. The young man nodded, the kind of nod that meant something final, then left. Outside the precinct, Frank Thompson leaned on his truck waiting. His old service cap shaded his eyes from the glare of afternoon. When Marcus walked out, Frank straightened a grin, cutting through the fatigue. "Word travels fast," he said. "Heard they tried to hang you for doing the right thing." Marcus smirked faintly. "Old habits die hard." Frank shrugged. "Justice ain't easy. That's why it matters." Marcus clasped his friend's shoulder. "You never change, do you?" "Someone's got to stay stubborn so the rest of you don't quit," Frank said. They shared a look that said more than words could carry. A few blocks away, Evelyn Powell had turned her little gas station into something else. A small wooden sign now hung by the door letters painted by hand, where Justice stood tall. She didn't sell souvenirs. She didn't advertise. But every day strangers stopped by to take pictures, to stand on the same patch of pavement where silence had finally lost. When the local reporter asked her why she did it, Evelyn just smiled. So nobody forgets that one voice still counts, especially when it shakes. That night, the news played quietly in Marcus's apartment. Public hearing scheduled tomorrow. Federal Oversight Task Force to address accountability reforms following viral incident. The anchor's voice faded into background noise. Marcus stood by the window, city lights reflecting in the glass. From above, the skyline pulsed cold blues and yellows cutting through the dark. He watched the streets below, people rushing home unaware that their small world had tilted a little closer to justice because one moment refused to stay hidden. He folded his hands behind his back. The suspension didn't bother him. The fight was never about position, it was about persistence. In the reflection, his face looked older, wearier, but steady. The kind of steady that comes from surviving disappointment and choosing not to turn bitter. Outside, a distant thunder rolled over the horizon, faint but certain like a promise. Marcus looked out at the city voice, barely above a whisper. "Let them strike back," he said. "I've seen worse storms." And with that, he turned off the light. The hearing room was packed before sunrise, rows of cameras, microphones, and restless murmurs humming beneath the marble ceiling. Every news network in the country had gone live. The banner on every screen read the same public hearing director, Marcus Reed, testifies on the Lakeside incident. When Marcus entered, the sound dimmed to a hush. He wore no medals, no uniform, just a dark suit and the quiet composure of a man who'd already survived the verdict that mattered most. He stood behind the witness podium, hands resting lightly on the wood. The chairman adjusted his mic. "Director Reed, you may proceed." Marcus nodded once. His voice carried even though it was soft. "I didn't come here to defend myself," he began. "I came to remind this country that justice isn't a performance, it's a promise. And promises lose their meaning when fear dictates who deserves dignity." The room went still. Every word landed like a slow hammer on cold iron. Then came the shuffle of cuffs. Tanner was brought in. The man who once mocked and shoved him now looked like a shadow of himself, wrinkled uniform eyes, red fingers, trembling. He was no longer a sergeant, not even an officer. Just another citizen standing before accountability. He asked to speak and the board allowed it. Tanner's voice cracked before it found strength. "My father was killed," he said, eyes fixed somewhere beyond Marcus, "by a suspect who looked like you. Same jacket, same calm. He pulled a gun before my old man could blink. I was 12. I swore that day I'd never hesitate again." His breath came ragged. "I thought I was protecting myself, but maybe I've been protecting a wound." The room held its breath. Marcus didn't move. When he finally spoke, his tone was neither cruel nor kind. It was truth. "Fear doesn't excuse hate," he said quietly. "It explains it. But if we let fear choose our targets, we stop being protectors and start being the thing people need protection from." Tanner's chin fell. His lips quivered. From the panel's far end, General Hayes leaned forward. "Order without conscience," she said, "is tyranny in uniform. We wear these badges to serve the law, not our trauma." The words cut through the silence like scripture. Then came the surprise voice, Briggs. The young officer stood up from the second row, his face pale but determined. "Madam Chair," he said, "I request permission to testify." The audience murmured and the chairman nodded. Briggs walked to the stand's shoulders, trembling hands gripping his statement. "I broke protocol that day," he said, voice cracking. "Not because I wanted to, because I couldn't watch dignity die in front of me again." He looked at Marcus. I thought wearing this badge made me a good man. But that day it was the man in cuffs who showed me what integrity looks like. The words hung heavy, raw, sincere. Marcus met his gaze and gave a slow nod. And you saved your soul, he said. Briggs swallowed hard. Maybe just a piece of it. A faint ripple moved through the gallery journalists, scribbling cameras flashing, yet none of them breaking the moment's weight. The chairman cleared his throat, shuffling the papers before him. After full review and testimony, he announced this board finds Sergeant Roy Tanner guilty of misconduct, abuse of authority, and violation of civil rights. His badge is hereby revoked. The Lakeside Police Department will undergo federal oversight for a minimum of 5 years. A few gasps escaped the audience. Tanner closed his eyes, shoulders sagging. His career had ended, but for the first time since the incident, there was no fight left in his face, only exhaustion. Reporters surged forward the moment the gavel fell. Microphones pointed like bayonets. One voice rose above the rest. Director Reed. Do you forgive him? Marcus turned slightly toward the noise. His expression was unreadable for a moment, then softened. Forgiveness isn't surrender, he said. It's strength. It's what keeps justice from turning into vengeance. He paused, scanning the room, the officers, the citizens, the flashing cameras. We don't heal by hiding what's broken. We heal by facing it together. The boardroom stayed silent for a long time after he stepped down. Even the cameras seemed to forget to move. Tanner sat with his head bowed. Hayes exhaled slowly, as though the whole system had just taken its first honest breath in years. Outside, sunlight spilled through the courthouse steps. Reporters swarmed the world, hungry for statements and headlines. But Marcus walked past them, all his pace, unhurried, his posture straight. He wasn't walking away from justice. He was walking with it, carrying the quiet, unglamorous truth of what it costs. And as he disappeared into the crowd, one could almost hear his father's words echoing beneath the noise. Don't let them make you hate them, son. 6 months later, the world had moved on, or at least it looked that way. The news cycle had chewed up the story and spat it out for fresher scandals. But inside a quiet brown envelope, stamped Federal Detention Center, Yuma Time still had a way of speaking. Marcus found it waiting on his desk that morning. No return address, just his name written in a shaky, unfamiliar hand. He slid it open carefully. The paper inside smelled faintly of old ink and dust. The handwriting was uneven, like someone relearning how to write truth. Director Reed, it began. I can't undo what I did, but I'm learning why I did it. For years I called it duty. I called it discipline. But really it was fear wearing a badge. You were right, I stopped protecting people and started protecting my anger. I won't ask forgiveness, I don't deserve it. But I'm trying to build something better from what's left of me. Maybe that's justice too. Roy Tanner. Marcus read it twice, then folded the letter with care. He didn't smile. He didn't sigh. He just placed it beside his old badge, the one scratched from years of fieldwork, edges dull, but never broken. He sat for a moment staring at the two objects, the letter and the badge side by side. Symbols of failure and faith coexisting on the same desk. The same story told from opposite sides of a gun. Across town, life was finding its rhythm again. The old rookie Briggs now wore a different uniform and instructor's jacket at the State Police Academy. He stood before a classroom full of young cadets, eyes sharp, voice steady. This badge, he said, holding us up, isn't power. It's a promise. He paused, letting the silence stretch. You don't earn it by arresting the guilty. You earn it by protecting the innocent, especially when the world's not watching. A few of the recruits nodded. Others just listened, unaware they were hearing a confession disguised as a lesson. When class ended, Briggs slipped a small note into his desk drawer, a folded newspaper clipping titled, The Reed Incident 6 months later. He didn't need to read it again. The story had already written itself into who he was. At the gas station off Route 41, Evelyn Powell was up on a ladder, hammering the last nail into a bronze plaque. The midday sun reflected off the polished surface. The inscription read, The Reed Incident, Never Again. Dedicated to those who spoke when silence was easier. Frank Thompson stood beside her, steadying the ladder with one hand, his veteran's cap pulled low. Looks good, he said, maybe even better than the truth. Evelyn chuckled softly. Truth's messy, she said. Plaques are tidy, but people need something to touch. Frank nodded, eyes soft. Yeah, but I like to think the real memorial's in folks' hearts, maybe in one rookie's conscience. She glanced down at him, and one man's courage. He smiled. That too. Later that afternoon, a familiar rumble echoed down the highway. A silver Harley glided to a stop near the gas pumps. The rider, dressed in a black jacket and helmet, killed the engine and sat for a moment before removing the helmet. Marcus Reed's hair had more gray in it now, but the same calm fire burned behind his eyes. He looked up at the plaque, then at Evelyn and Frank. She waved from the porch, coffee in hand. "Didn't think you'd come back this way." Marcus smiled, stepping off the bike. "Didn't think I'd need to," he said. Frank grinned. "Guess Justice wanted a refill." Marcus laughed, a quiet, honest sound. He walked to the plaque, traced the engraved words with his fingers, and nodded. "You did good, Evelyn." She tilted her head. "We all did our part." He looked at both of them, the woman who'd refused to stop filming, and the soldier who'd refused to stop believing. "No," Marcus said softly. "You did more than your part. You reminded the world what courage looks like when no one's paying attention." The three of them stood there for a while, no words, just the hum of the wind and the distant rhythm of passing trucks. When Marcus finally turned to leave, he slid his helmet back on, mounted the Harley, and revved the engine once. The sound rolled across the desert like thunder, remembering its name. Evelyn called out, "Where to now?" Director Marcus looked back over his shoulder, the sun catching his smile. "Wherever justice takes, the long way home." He paused, eyes narrowing at the horizon, the endless road stretching west, bathed in orange light. "Justice doesn't retire," he murmured. Then he twisted the throttle and the Harley roared to life. As he rode off, the plaque gleamed in the fading sun, a reflection of everything that had been broken and rebuilt. And for the first time in a long while, the desert felt like it was breathing again. The auditorium was packed wall to wall, rows of fresh cadets in crisp blue uniforms, the air electric with pride and nerves. Flags lined the walls. Cameras from local stations hummed quietly in the back. And standing at the podium, hands folded over a folder worn from years of fieldwork, was Marcus Reed. He waited for the applause to fade before speaking. His voice was low, but it carried steady calm, the kind of tone that comes from having nothing left to prove. "I've spent over 30 years wearing a badge," he began, "and here's what I've learned. Power fades. Principle remains." The room went still. You could have heard the breath between heartbeats. He looked over the faces of the new recruits, wide-eyed, eager, untested. "That badge on your chest," he said, tapping his own, "isn't a shield against the world. It's a mirror. And one day it's going to show you who you really are." Behind him, the massive LED screen flickered to life. A video began to play, the same footage that had once set the nation on fire. The gas station, the cuffs, the quiet defiance, the calm words that had outlived the noise. "You just slapped the man investigating you." The crowd didn't move, didn't blink. For the first time in Academy history, the Reed incident had become mandatory curriculum, a national case study on ethics, restraint, and the difference between authority and humanity. When the video ended, no one clapped. They just sat in silence, the kind of silence that feels like reflection. In the front row sat familiar faces. General Elaine Hayes in civilian clothes, now her posture still perfect. Briggs wearing his instructor's pin pride, shining through the quiet humility. Evelyn Powell in her Sunday best, clutching the same phone she'd used that day. Frank Thompson, hands folded over his cane military ribbons pinned to his jacket. And even Chief Bennett, no longer a chief, but now serving as a federal advisor for police reform. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, including him. Each of them had come to see how far the ripples had reached. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside lay a gleaming silver medal, the Medal of Civil Service Honor, awarded by Congress for his courage and moral leadership in the pursuit of justice. He held it up, the medal catching the stage lights. Then, without ceremony, he unclipped it and placed it on the podium. "This," he said, "means nothing if we forget who we serve." The sound of those words rolled through the room like thunder, quiet but undeniable. He looked out over the cadets one last time. "Every generation thinks it's fighting for justice," he said softly. "The truth is we're fighting for memory, because the moment we forget what happened, we give permission for it to happen again." Then he stepped back. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the entire hall rose to its feet. Applause erupted, loud, unbroken, raw. It wasn't celebration, it was gratitude. When it finally quieted, General Hayes approached the stage. She leaned close enough that only he could hear her. "The White House wants your report on Monday," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Marcus chuckled. "Then let's make it count." Hayes smirked. "You always do." They shook hands, a silent pact between warriors who'd fought the same war from different sides of the table. Outside, the sun was dipping low, staining the horizon gold. Marcus walked across the parking lot, his reflection trailing long and thin across the asphalt. His Harley waited by the gate, the same silver one from that Arizona highway. He slipped on his leather gloves, pulled the helmet over his head, and paused. Around him, cadets were filing out of the building, still buzzing with the echo of his words. Briggs called after him. "Sir, you riding alone again?" Marcus grinned. "Justice rides light." He swung his leg over the bike, started the engine, and let the rumble fill the air. For a moment, the sound drowned out everything else, the applause, the speeches, even the pass. He looked once more at the Academy building, where banners of service, integrity, courage fluttered in the wind. Then he whispered almost to himself, "True authority doesn't come from power, but from principle." The Harley rolled forward, tires humming against the asphalt, fading toward the open road. The sunset caught his jacket and turned it the color of fire. "Fade out." The screen turned black and the words appeared in white. "True authority doesn't come from power, but from principle." Then the familiar logo of Mr. Max Stories glowed into view. Narrator's voice. "If this story moved you, like, share, and send it to someone who still believes in what's right. Because silence protects injustice." The music swelled, a slow, hopeful piano, and the story closed not with an ending, but with a heartbeat that refused to fade. Sometimes justice doesn't come with a gavel or a headline. It comes quietly through courage, truth, and the strength to do what's right, even when no one's watching. That's what this story was really about: standing tall, staying human, and never letting power erase principle. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in justice, and subscribe to Mr. Max Stories for more powerful tales that speak to the heart. Your support means more than you know. It's what keeps our team creating stories that remind the world that empathy still matters and truth still wins. This is Mr. Max Stories, where silence ends and justice begins.